Good evening. In this quiet vigil before Easter Sunday, before the great celebration of the resurrection of Jesus, in this vigil night, I'm not minded to make some sort of triumphant proclamation of the excellent historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, though the evidence is indeed excellent. And if it were for any other event than a resurrection, something unique, something so surprising, I don't think anyone would have any difficulty in believing it at all. Equally, I'm not minded this evening to make some bracing demand of my fellow Christians and indeed of the world that as a result of the resurrection of Jesus, we should experience a call to arms to make the world a world fit for resurrection, to build for the kingdom, to work for God's kingdom, to take up spiritual weapons, not physical ones, of course, to do God's work. No, this evening I'm rather minded to do something else, and that is reflect upon the futility of existence without this great proclamation. The ultimate futility, I suppose, if there is no hope for futurity, if there is no hope for an afterlife, then we can make the best of things. We can achieve much. We can build wonderful things for our descendants. We can do good that will be left for those after us. But it will all come to an end. And not only will our individual lives and the lives of those we love come to an end, but we're reliably informed that this earth will become uninhabitable at some point in the future. The human species may well die out at some point in the future, sooner perhaps rather than later. And after the end of the earth, the universe itself, again, we're reliably informed, will one day come to an end, become uninhabitable, cease to exist in some dissipation into nothingness or a crunch back into a single point. And if that is the case, then I suppose it would be true to say that things are ultimately futile, and that may not bother you. You may be perfectly happy. In fact, you may welcome the prospect of personal annihilation and the annihilation of the universe. One shouldn't suppose that the Christian message is always one of joy and hope. There are some people who actually prefer the idea of ceasing to exist, or say they do, and I don't suppose they're being hypocritical. They may well be telling the truth about their own feelings. But it's something that I have to say I find slightly depressing. Not perhaps so much the end of the universe, because I find it hard to feel much emotion about that one way or the other. I find it hard to feel much emotion about the prospect of the earth coming to an end, ultimately, if it's millions of years hence. I don't suppose that really bothers me at all. The end of the human species, perhaps it's slightly shocking to say, is something that doesn't bother me much either. Species come and go many, many thousands of years down the line. If the human species has evolved into something entirely different or ceased to exist altogether, I don't think that troubles me terribly. The prospect of my immediate descendants finding the world uninhabitable is one that does appall me, and I do feel a moral obligation to make the world as inhabitable as possible for descendants even after my immediate ones. But I suppose it would be true to say that this idea really doesn't engage my emotions at a very deep level. But what does engage my emotions at a very deep level is, I'll be perfectly blunt and say the prospect of my own annihilation is something that I find slightly troubling and distressing. It's not something I want to happen, and I'm not much comforted by the reflection that if I cease to exist, there will be no me to worry about it. From my perspective now, it is something that troubles me. But even more than that is the prospect of the annihilation of those I love. And that is something that troubles me very deeply. I want there to be a world in which these people exist. They are important to me. I don't want them to come to an end, and I certainly don't want them to come to an end before I do. I don't want to suffer the grief of bereavement. But further than that, I consider the many millions of people over the centuries and the many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in the world today, whose lives are blighted by suffering and misfortune, and perhaps even more troubling, the cruelty and indifference of others. If I'm told to face with equanimity the prospect of these people ceasing to exist, the prospect of them having no redress, no vindication, no comfort for the troubles that they've suffered, then that is something that I find deeply distressing. And if I'm presented with the possibility of resurrection, of the possibility that because 2,000 years ago, one man rose from the dead, one man who was not just a man, but God in human form, and that therefore all of us can hope for resurrection, and all of us can hope for resurrection not only for us, for those we love, but for all the generations who've died since the first humans, and perhaps for animals too, for the earth itself to be restored in some way, the whole universe to be restored. And that is a joyful and a wonderful prospect indeed. And if it actually happened, if it really did happen, then what a hope this is. And if you want to say that the historical evidence is good, which I believe it is, then why can't we hope for it? Why can we not overcome the sadness? Why do we have to make some sort of accommodation with death where we just put up with it and make the best of things for as long as we last and for as long as those we love last? If we can hope for more, why shouldn't we? And if it's a believable hope, why should it not be proclaimed from the rooftops as Christians will do this tomorrow morning on Easter Sunday? And I think I would want to end with the following reflection. If I felt that one of you watching this video were to feel a hope that you hadn't been able to feel before, if I were to be able to bring into your life some comfort, not the comfort of a lie, not the comfort of a false hope, but the comfort of something I have every reason to believe is true, then I think I would consider that my life's work had been done. And if it pleased God to take my life this night, this very night, I think I would die happy. Because if this hope is true, then the wonderful declaration, the proclamation that Jared Manley Hopkins makes at the end of his great poem, that nature is a Heraclitean fire and of the comfort of the resurrection, that this Jack Joke, you and me, ordinary people, poor potsherd, is immortal diamond, immortal diamond. And may you all have a happy Easter, and may you be filled with the comfort and the hope of the resurrection of Christ.